The first sound Emily Carter heard was not the ocean, not the jazz, not the laughter of millionaires under crystal lights. It was crying. On the upper deck of the Ivory Star, everything looked expensive enough to silence ordinary fear. Champagne moved through the crowd in tall glasses. White tablecloths lifted softly in the coastal wind. A saxophone played near the stern, smooth and low, while the Atlantic rolled black and endless beyond the railings. The yacht was anchored 3 miles off Newport, glowing like a private city on the water, and every guest aboard seemed determined to pretend the world outside did not exist. Emily Carter stood near the service station with a silver tray balanced on one palm, her white waitress shirt buttoned neatly to the collar, her blonde hair tied back with a wine-red ribbon that had already survived 6 hours of wind, spilled tonic, and dismissive glances. She was 27, quiet, pale-skinned, and almost invisible in the way service workers learn to be invisible around powerful people. She noticed empty glasses before hands reached for them. She heard a fork fall before anyone turned. She could tell when a guest wanted black coffee by the way he stared at dessert without touching it. That night, what she noticed was a sound that did not belong. A thin, broken cry. Small, muffled, coming from beneath her feet. Emily froze. For 1 second, the tray stayed perfectly still in her hand. Then the sound came again, swallowed quickly by applause from the far end of the deck, where Nathan Whitmore had just finished telling a story at someone else's expense. Nathan stood beneath the warm deck lights in an ivory blazer, his silver watch catching every flash of camera and champagne. He was 41, handsome in the polished way money could maintain, with pale skin, sharp blue eyes, and the relaxed arrogance of a man who had never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. His company had built the navigation system installed on half the private yachts along the East Coast. Tonight's party was not really a party. It was a celebration before a contract, a floating showroom for investors who liked their profit margins, served with lobster and aged bourbon. Nathan laughed again, and the people around him laughed with him, because that was what people did when a millionaire decided something was funny. Emily turned toward the narrow stairwell leading below deck. The crew door was half hidden behind a row of potted palms, and a velvet rope meant to keep guests from wandering into the working parts of the yacht. She waited, listened. The cry came once more, softer now, like someone trying not to be heard. She stepped toward the stairwell. "Miss?" a guest called, lifting an empty glass without looking at her face. Emily did not move toward him. Her eyes stayed on the stairs. Across the deck, Nathan noticed. First with amusement, then with irritation. A waitress standing still at his party was a small flaw in a perfect picture, and Nathan Whitmore did not like flaws. "Everything all right?" he called, loud enough for the nearest guest to turn. Emily looked at him. "Mr. Whitmore," she said carefully, "I think someone is crying below deck." The conversation around them loosened into quiet chuckles. Nathan blinked once, then smiled as if she had handed him a joke already wrapped. "Below deck," he repeated. "Relax, sweetheart. It's a yacht, not a haunted house." A few guests laughed. One of the investors covered his smile with a napkin. Emily felt the heat of attention move across her face, but her expression did not change. She had been laughed at before. In diners, in hotel ballrooms, in rooms where people thought a uniform meant a person had nothing worth hearing. She only lowered the tray to the service table. One glass chimed softly against another. "I'm not talking about ghosts, sir," she said. "I heard a child." The laughter thinned, not because they believed her, because her voice had not shaken. Nathan's smile stayed in place, but his eyes cooled. "There are no children below deck." The guest list was cleared. Security checked every cabin. Emily glanced toward the stairwell again. The yacht shifted gently under her shoes. Somewhere beneath the music, beneath the polished floor, beneath all that money pretending to be certainty, the sound had stopped. And somehow, that was worse. She took one step toward the stairs. Nathan gave a short laugh, sharper this time. "If the ice machine frightened you, Miss Carter, I'm sure someone from the crew can escort you back to the kitchen." This time, Emily looked directly at him. Her wine-red ribbon moved slightly in the wind. "No, sir," she said. "Someone should come with me because I'm going down there." Emily did not wait for permission. She had learned long ago that permission often arrived after the moment had already passed. She walked to the crew door, lifted the velvet rope with one hand, and stepped around the potted palms as the music continued behind her. The saxophone still played. The glasses still touched. The guests still watched with the mild curiosity of people who believed trouble was something hired staff handled quietly. Nathan Whitmore followed her with his eyes, his smile fading by a fraction. "Miss Carter," he said, "that area is restricted." Emily paused with her hand on the metal door handle. It was cold beneath her fingers. "Then someone restricted a child into it," she answered. A hush moved across the nearest tables. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to make a few people stop chewing, enough for one investor to lower his champagne glass. Nathan's jaw tightened. No one spoke to him like that on his own yacht. Certainly not a waitress with tired eyes and a wine-red ribbon in her hair. His head of security, Paul Merrick, stepped forward from near the bar, broad-shouldered, earpiece shining under the deck lights. "I checked the lower compartments myself," Paul said. "There is nothing down there except storage, electrical access, and maintenance equipment." Emily looked at him, then at the door. "Did you check with the engines running and music above you?" Paul's expression hardened. "I know my job." "So do I," Emily said softly. "And my job is noticing what people need before they have to ask twice." Nathan gave a quiet laugh through his nose, but this time it did not travel far. Something in Emily's calmness had taken the easy pleasure out of mocking her. She opened the door. A narrow stairwell descended into dim yellow light, the air below carrying the smell of metal, cleaning solution, and cold seawater. The wind from the deck slipped past her shoulders and pushed the ribbon against her cheek. She reached for the emergency flashlight clipped beside the door. "You are not going alone," Nathan said suddenly. Emily turned. For the first time that evening, he was no longer smiling. "Then come," she said. It was not an invitation. It was a measure of him. Nathan hesitated. Behind him stood investors, attorneys, board members, people who knew him as a man who controlled rooms before entering them. In front of him stood a waitress who had just made his perfect evening feel dangerously uncertain. Pride moved first. Concern came second. He stepped past Paul and followed her down. The stairs were steep, barely wide enough for two shoulders, each metal step humming faintly with the life of the yacht. Above them, the music dulled into a soft pulse. Below, the silence thickened. Emily moved slowly, one hand on the rail, flashlight angled toward the floor. Nathan stayed 2 steps behind her, his ivory blazer too bright for the narrow industrial corridor. "This is ridiculous," he murmured, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. Emily did not answer. She stopped near a side passage marked crew access only. The sound came again. Not a full cry this time. A breath catching. A small, frightened sound pulled quickly back into silence. Nathan heard it. Emily knew because his hand closed around the railing. The color shifted in his face. "That could be pipes," he said, but the words were weaker than before. Emily turned the flashlight toward a half-open storage alcove. On the floor, caught beneath the edge of a rubber mat, was a small blue sneaker. She crouched and picked it up. It was wet, child-sized, the kind with a little white sailboat stitched near the heel. Nathan stared at it. Where did that come from? Emily slipped one finger inside the sneaker and pulled out a folded scrap of damp paper. The ink had blurred at the edges, but 2 words remained clear under the flashlight beam. "Do not." Emily's face tightened. Nathan leaned closer. "Do not what?" he whispered. She lifted her eyes toward the darker hallway ahead, where a thin line of water shimmered along the floor. "I think," she said, "someone did not want him found." Emily kept the flashlight low, following the thin trail of water as it slid along the narrow corridor and disappeared beneath a gray metal door at the far end. Nathan walked behind her without speaking. The yacht sounded different down here. Above deck, it had been all music and polished laughter. Below deck, every noise felt honest. The low vibration of the engines, the soft tick of cooling pipes, the faint slap of water against the hull. Emily held the blue sneaker in one hand and the damp note in the other. "Do not." 2 unfinished words. 2 words that made the air feel smaller. Nathan looked at the door ahead. "That compartment should be locked from this side only," he said. "It is an old equipment room. Nobody uses it during events." Emily aimed the flashlight at the handle. A plastic security seal hung from it, broken but still looped loosely through the latch as if someone had wanted it to look untouched from a distance. She stepped closer. Someone opened it. Nathan reached for the handle, but Emily lifted a hand before he touched it. "Wait." He stopped, surprised by how quickly he obeyed. Emily crouched again, studying the floor. There were small wet marks near the door, not footprints exactly, more like the smudges left by someone dragged a bag or a box through seawater. Beside them lay a single gold button, bright against the dull metal floor. Nathan's eyes moved to it. His face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. That is from the staff uniform? Emily asked. Nathan shook his head slowly. No, his voice dropped. That is from a guest jacket. The cry came again from behind the door. Closer now. A tiny sound, tired and scared, followed by a soft tapping, 3 uneven knocks against metal. Emily leaned near the door. Hello, she said, her voice low and steady. My name is Emily. I heard you. You are not in trouble. Silence. Then a small voice, barely more than air. Please do not tell him. Nathan went still. Emily looked back at him. Tell who? She asked gently. The child did not answer. Instead, there was another sound, a shallow gasp, and the tapping stopped. Emily's calm face tightened. We need this open. Nathan pulled out his phone, but there was no signal below deck. He swore under his breath, then caught himself, glancing at the door as if the child might hear his panic. Emily noticed. For the first time, Nathan Whitmore looked less like a millionaire and more like a man standing outside a room he could not buy his way into. He reached for the emergency intercom on the wall. Static answered. Nothing else. Paul, Nathan said into it. Merrick, respond. More static. Emily looked at the broken seal, the water, the button, then the hinges. The door is jammed. I can call the crew from upstairs. By the time they believe me, the water may be higher. Nathan stared at her. How do you know that? Emily did not look away from the hinges. Because water always sounds harmless at first. The answer landed between them with a history he did not understand. She set the tray knife she had taken from the service station into the edge of the hinge plate. It was not sharp enough for anything dangerous, but it was strong, flat, and narrow. Her hands were careful, practical. You have done this before, Nathan said. Emily pressed the knife under the first screw cap. I have opened stuck doors before. That is not what I meant. She paused only for a second. Maine. 6 years ago. A ferry lost power near the harbor during a storm. I was not crew. I was serving coffee on board. Nathan watched her work. The first screw cover popped loose and clicked against the floor. What happened? Emily listened to the child breathing behind the door. Her voice stayed quiet. People kept saying the noise was nothing. Nathan had no answer for that. The second screw cover slipped free. Water touched the toe of Emily's black shoe. Cold. Rising slowly. She looked at the door and spoke again, softer than before. Sweetheart, I need you to move away from the door if you can hear me. There was a rustle inside. Then the small voice returned. I cannot. My foot is stuck. Nathan's breath caught. What is your name? Emily asked. For a moment, only the engine answered. Then the child whispered, Oliver. Nathan's hand fell from the wall. The name drained every trace of color from his face. Oliver, he said, barely audible. Emily turned. You know him? Nathan stared at the gray door as if it had become the edge of the world. He is my nephew. Nathan did not move for 3 full seconds. The name had done what no investor, rival, or headline ever could. It had taken the room out from under him. Oliver was supposed to be asleep in the forward cabin with his nanny, wrapped in a navy blanket, far from the noise of the party and the business smiles Nathan had mistaken for control. Oliver was 8 years old, small for his age, with his mother's soft brown eyes and a habit of collecting tiny model sailboats from every harbor Nathan visited. He was the only child Nathan had ever learned to speak gently around. Now his voice was coming from behind a jammed metal door below deck. Emily saw Nathan's hand tighten around the broken intercom. She saw the millionaire disappear for one breath and the uncle appear in his place. Oliver, Nathan said, pressing his palm against the door. It is Uncle Nathan. I am right here. Inside, the boy made a small sound that tried to become words and failed. Emily leaned close, keeping her voice steady enough for both of them. Oliver, I need you to listen to me. Can you wiggle your toes? A pause. Then, faintly, a little. Good. That is very good. Is the water touching you? Another pause. My shoe. Emily looked down. Water had spread across the corridor in a thin, shining sheet. Not rushing, not dramatic, just patient. That was what made it frightening. Slow things gave people time to deny them. Nathan turned toward the stairs. I am getting Paul. Emily caught his sleeve, not hard, just enough to stop him. The ivory fabric pulled slightly under her fingers. Send someone from the stairs if you have to, but do not leave him hearing silence again. Nathan stared at her hand on his blazer. Any other night, any other person, and he would have noticed the breach of status. Tonight, he only nodded. He took one breath and shouted up the corridor for crew assistance, his voice controlled but stripped of its earlier polish. Merrick, lower deck now. Bring tools. No answer came except muffled music from above, still cheerful, still wrong. Emily returned to the hinge. The tray knife slipped once, scraping the metal. She adjusted her grip. Her fingers were cold now. Nathan crouched beside her. Tell me what to do. She looked at him, and for a moment, he understood the quiet humiliation of needing instruction from someone he had laughed at 5 minutes earlier. Emily did not make him pay for it. Hold the flashlight steady. Not on my hands. On the screws. He obeyed. The beam trembled at first, then steadied. Emily worked the edge under the hinge plate, easing it piece by piece. Behind the door, Oliver sniffled. Uncle Nathan? I am here, buddy. I was looking for Captain. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Why? The lady said you wanted me to give him a note. Emily stopped. Nathan looked at her. The corridor seemed to narrow around those words. What lady, Oliver? Emily asked. Miss Claire, he whispered. Nathan's face tightened. Claire Hensley was not a nanny. She was his personal event coordinator, the woman who had managed guest access, crew schedules, press timing, and every movement aboard the Ivory Star that evening. The woman who had assured him Oliver was safe before the first guest arrived. Emily filed the name away without changing expression. Panic would not open the door. Focus might. She loosened the first hinge screw. It dropped into her palm, wet and tiny. Nathan swallowed. I trusted her. Emily moved to the next screw. Trust is not the same as checking. The words were not cruel. That made them worse. Nathan held the light, and for once he had no answer ready. From above, footsteps finally clattered down the stairs. Paul Merrick appeared at the far end of the corridor with 2 crewmen behind him, carrying a toolbox and a coil of rope. His expression shifted when he saw Nathan kneeling in water beside the waitress. Sir, what is happening? Nathan did not look away from the door. My nephew is inside. Paul went pale. That is impossible. I cleared this level. Emily lifted the broken security seal without turning around. Then someone cleared it after you. Paul reached for the toolbox, but Nathan raised one hand. Do exactly what she says. The order landed with quiet force. Paul looked at Emily then, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Not a uniform, not background. A person holding the room together while everyone else arrived late. Emily pointed to the lower hinge. Remove that plate slowly. If the door shifts too fast, it may press against his foot. The crewman nodded and began working. Nathan leaned closer to the door. Oliver, Emily is going to get you out. Inside, after a trembling breath, the boy whispered, Is she the lady with the red ribbon? Emily paused. Her eyes softened. Yes, she said. That is me. Oliver's voice came back small, but clearer. I saw you upstairs. You look nice. The corridor fell silent. Nathan stared at Emily, water around her shoes, sleeves damp, hair loosened by the wind, ribbon still bright against the gray light. 5 minutes earlier, he had called her frightened by an ice machine. Now his nephew trusted her voice more than anyone else on the yacht. The second hinge loosened. The door gave a tired metallic sigh. Emily braced one hand against it. Slowly, she said. Everybody moved slowly. The door shifted less than an inch, but that inch changed everything. A colder breath of air slipped out from the equipment room, carrying the smell of wet rope, old wood, and seawater. Emily held the edge steady while Paul worked the lower hinge with slow, careful turns. Nathan kept the flashlight fixed where she needed it, though his knuckles had gone pale around the handle. Nobody laughed now. Above them, the party music still pulsed faintly through the ceiling, but down in the corridor, every person listened to the small movements behind the door. Oliver, Emily said, when the door opens, do not try to stand right away. Just tell me where your foot is caught. Under something, he whispered. It is heavy. Nathan closed his eyes for half a second. Emily heard the guilt in the silence that followed. Rich men often thought guilt had to be loud to be real. It did not. Sometimes it was only a man realizing he had mistaken arrangements for protection. The final screw came loose. Paul looked to Nathan for direction, but Nathan looked to Emily. That small turn of his head was almost nothing, and yet everyone saw it. Emily nodded once. Pull the door toward us 2 inches. No more. Paul and the crewman eased it open. Metal groaned softly. The flashlight beam entered the room in a narrow line, cutting through darkness until it found Oliver sitting on the floor beside a stack of storage crates. His face was pale, his hair damp with sweat, and one sneaker was missing. His other foot was pinned beneath the edge of a lightweight folding panel that had fallen from a storage rack. Not crushed, not badly hurt, trapped just enough to keep him from moving, and scared enough to make the room feel much smaller than it was. Oliver, Nathan breathed. The boy turned his head and tried to smile. It broke something in Nathan's face. Emily slipped through the narrow opening before anyone else moved. Hi, sweetheart, she said, kneeling in the shallow water. I found your shoe. Oliver looked at the blue sneaker in her hand and gave a tiny nod. I dropped it. That is all right. Shoes are replaceable. She glanced at the panel, then at the way it rested against a crate. You are not. Nathan crouched at the door, unable to fit beside her without crowding the space. Buddy, I am right here. Oliver's eyes filled, but he did not cry loudly. He seemed to be trying very hard to be brave for the adults. Emily noticed that too. You do not have to be quiet anymore, she told him. You did exactly the right thing. You kept making sound until someone heard you. Nathan swallowed hard. Paul passed Emily a small pry bar, but she shook her head. Too much force. The panel could shift. She looked around and spotted a stack of folded life vests on a shelf. Hand me 2 of those. A crewman passed them in. Emily slid one vest under the panel, then another, creating a soft lift instead of a hard pull. On 3, raise it slowly, she said. Paul crouched at the opening and reached in with the crewman. Nathan tried to help, but Emily stopped him with one look. Talk to him. Nathan froze, then leaned closer. Oliver, remember the model sailboat from Bar Harbor? The one with the crooked blue mast. Oliver sniffed. You said it had character. It did. Still does. Just like you. Emily counted softly. 1, 2, 3. The panel rose an inch. Enough. Emily guided Oliver's foot free with both hands, slow and gentle, then slid the blue sneaker back on halfway, so he would have something familiar to feel. There, she whispered. You are free. Oliver reached for her before he reached for Nathan. Not because he loved his uncle less, but because Emily was the voice that had entered the darkness first. She lifted him carefully, keeping his foot supported, and passed him through the opening into Nathan's arms. Nathan held the boy against his chest and did not seem to care that his ivory blazer was soaked at the sleeve. He pressed his cheek to Oliver's hair, breathing as if the whole ocean had been lifted from his lungs. I am sorry, he whispered. I am so sorry. Oliver clung to him. Emily stayed kneeling in the room for one more second, checking the floor, the shelves, the broken camera mounted high in the corner. Its lens had been turned toward the wall. Deliberately. Beneath it, caught on a screw, was a tiny thread of ivory fabric. Not from Nathan's blazer. The color was close, but the weave was different. Emily picked it free and closed it in her palm. When she stepped back into the corridor, Paul was already calling for medical help over the restored intercom. Nathan looked up from Oliver, his eyes wet but focused. Thank you, he said. The words came out rough, unfamiliar. Emily glanced down at the thread in her hand, then toward the stairwell where the party waited above them, unaware that its glittering surface had cracked. Do not thank me yet, she said quietly. Someone brought him down here, and whoever it was may still be on this yacht. Nathan carried Oliver through the narrow corridor as if the boy weighed less than a memory. Paul walked ahead, speaking into his radio with a clipped urgency that no longer tried to sound calm. Emily followed one step behind, the blue sneaker print still damp on her palm, the ivory thread closed between her fingers. The stairwell seemed longer going up. Every step carried them closer to the music, the lights, the people who had been laughing while a child whispered behind a metal door. At the top, the crew door opened, and the party broke apart without anyone saying a word. The saxophone stopped mid-note. A woman near the bar covered her mouth. One of the investors slowly lowered his glass. Nathan Whitmore emerged with Oliver in his arms, his ivory blazer wet along one side, his perfect hair fallen out of place, his face stripped bare of every polished expression he had worn that evening. Emily stepped out behind him, sleeves damp, black shoes dark with water, wine-red ribbon loosened but still tied in her hair. The same guests who had laughed at her minutes earlier now looked away as if the floor had become very interesting. Shame did that. It searched for somewhere to hide. "Get the doctor," Nathan said. His voice was quiet, but it moved across the deck with more force than any shout. A yacht medic hurried forward with a blanket and a medical kit. Oliver clung to Nathan's neck, but kept looking back at Emily. "She heard me," he whispered. The words were small. The silence they created was not. Nathan looked at Emily then, truly looked at her in front of everyone. Not as a waitress. Not as a problem. Not as someone who had interrupted his evening. As the person who had heard what his entire security team, his staff, and his wealth had missed. "Yes," Nathan said, his voice rough. "She did." Paul stepped close, pale and unsettled. "Sir, Claire Hensley is not answering her radio." Nathan's eyes hardened, but Emily lifted her hand slightly. "Do not announce that yet." Paul frowned. "Excuse me. If she is still on board, panic gives her a reason to disappear." Nathan looked at her again. There it was, the second lesson of the night. Courage was not noise. It was precision. "What do you suggest?" he asked. The question reached every guest within earshot. A millionaire asking a waitress what to do. Not as performance. Not as kindness. Because he needed her answer. Emily glanced across the deck. Guests clustered in soft circles, whispering. Crew members pretended not to stare. Near the forward lounge, a woman in a cream suit stood too still beside the glass doors. Claire Hensley. Blonde hair in a smooth twist. Tablet pressed to her chest. Expression composed enough to be suspicious. Emily did not point. She only turned slightly, letting Nathan follow her gaze. "Keep everyone on deck," she said. "Say it is for Oliver's safety. Ask your captain to secure the tender boats." Quietly, Nathan gave Paul a look. Paul moved at once. Emily watched Claire's fingers tighten around the tablet. Just once. Almost nothing. But Emily had built a life on almost nothing. A half-empty cup. A breath before a lie. A child trying not to cry below deck. Nathan handed Oliver to the medic only after the boy agreed, then crouched before him. "Emily is going to stay where I can see her," he said. "And I am not leaving this deck." Oliver nodded, wrapped in the blanket, eyes tired but safe. Nathan stood and moved beside Emily. "She said Claire gave him a note," he murmured. "Oliver said that downstairs." Emily nodded, and the camera in the compartment was turned toward the wall. She opened her palm just enough for him to see the ivory thread. This was caught near it. Nathan stared. That could belong to half the people here. Maybe. Emily closed her fingers again, but only one of them just stopped blinking. Across the deck, Claire began walking toward the side passage that led to the private office below the bridge. Not fast, not slow. The practiced walk of someone trying to look useful while leaving. Nathan took one step, anger rising in him like fire, but Emily stopped him with two quiet words. "Not yet." He turned to her, breathing hard. "She put my nephew in that room." Emily's eyes stayed on Claire. "Then let her show us why." Nathan looked at the woman in the waitress uniform. The woman he had laughed at. The woman whose calm now held his entire yacht in place. For the first time that night, he did not lead. He listened. Claire Hensley reached the side passage with her tablet held neatly against her chest, but the captain stepped into view before she could enter. He did not touch her. He did not accuse her. He only stood there with his hands folded in front of him, calm as a closed gate. Claire gave him a polite smile that did not reach her eyes. "Captain, I need to access Mr. Whitmore's office. The press statement must be prepared before rumors spread." The captain looked past her to Nathan. Nathan did not move. Emily stood beside him, quiet, watching the tiny details Claire could not fully control. The extra breath before she spoke. The slight lift of one shoulder. The way her thumb kept pressing the edge of the tablet case. Once, twice, 3 times, as if checking that something was still hidden inside. "No one leaves the deck," Nathan said. His voice carried evenly through the night air. "Not until we understand how my nephew ended up below deck." A ripple moved through the guests. Claire turned slowly, shaping concern onto her face. "Oliver was below deck?" she asked. "That is terrible. I thought he was asleep in the forward cabin." Emily watched her eyes, not her mouth. People could train their mouths. Eyes were harder. Claire's gaze flicked to Oliver, wrapped in a blanket beside the medic, then to the crew door, then to Paul Merrick. Too many calculations. Too little surprise. Nathan started to speak, but Emily touched the sleeve of his ivory blazer, barely there. Wait. Claire stepped closer, speaking now to the audience as much as to Nathan. This is exactly why we need order. A child wandered into a restricted area during a crowded event. It is unfortunate, but turning this into a public scene will damage the company and frighten the guests. The old Nathan would have heard the business logic first. The new Nathan heard Oliver's small voice through a metal door. He said nothing. Emily took one step forward. He did not wander. Claire looked at her, as if noticing a stain on linen. I am sorry, who are you? The waitress who found him. A few guests lowered their eyes again. Claire smiled faintly. Then you must be overwhelmed. These situations can feel very dramatic if you are not trained for them. Emily's face remained calm. You are right. Training matters. She opened her palm. The ivory thread lay across her skin, small and pale under the deck lights. So does evidence. Claire's smile stayed in place for half a second too long. A thread? From the broken camera mount in the equipment room. Many people are wearing light-colored clothes tonight. Yes, Emily said. That is why I did not say your name. Silence fell sharp and clean. Claire's chin lifted. She realized then that she had stepped toward a trap made of her own nerves. Nathan looked at Emily, understanding too late and admiring it at the same time. Emily had not accused. She had let Claire accuse herself by defending too quickly. Paul moved closer, but Nathan raised a hand again, keeping the moment quiet. Claire, Nathan said. Oliver told us you gave him a note. Claire's fingers tightened around the tablet. Children misunderstand things. Oliver looked up from the blanket. His voice was tired, but clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. You said Uncle Nathan wanted me to give it to Captain Roy. Claire turned toward him, softening her face as if kindness could erase memory. Oliver, sweetheart, you were confused. Emily stepped slightly between Claire and the boy, not dramatically, just enough. Do not ask him to doubt what he remembers. The words were gentle. They landed hard. Nathan's eyes changed. There were many kinds of cruelty in the world. Some raised their voices. Some smiled and called it confusion. Claire's phone buzzed against the tablet case. Once. Then again. In the quiet, everyone heard it. Emily looked at the case. May I see that? Claire gave a small laugh. Absolutely not. Nathan held out his hand. Give me the tablet, Claire. Nathan, think carefully. You are upset. You are letting a server guide a corporate security matter in front of investors. There it was. The word server polished into an insult. Nathan looked at Emily's damp sleeves, the loosened wine-red ribbon, the water on her shoes, the child alive under a blanket because she had listened when he had laughed. Then he looked back at Claire. No, he said quietly. I am letting the only person who paid attention help me find the truth. Claire's face emptied. For the first time all night, she had no graceful expression ready. The captain stepped forward and held out his hand. Slowly, Claire gave him the tablet. Nathan did not smile. Emily did not either. The ocean moved softly around the ivory star, and above the silent deck, every glittering light suddenly seemed less like luxury and more like a witness. The captain carried the tablet to a small standing table near the bar, where the deck lights fell bright and clean across the screen. Nathan stood beside him with Oliver wrapped in a blanket only a few feet away, close enough for the boy to see his uncle, far enough that the adults could keep their voices soft. Emily remained near the edge of the circle, hands folded in front of her damp apron, the ivory thread still resting in her palm. She did not lean forward. She did not demand to be believed. She had already learned that truth did not need a loud entrance. It only needed one open door. Paul Merrick unlocked the tablet using Claire's staff access code, his face growing tighter with each tap. There is a deleted event file, he said. Security camera schedule, lower deck, 9:38 this evening. Nathan looked at Claire. That was 15 minutes before Oliver disappeared from the cabin. Claire crossed her arms. Deleted files can be recovered from any device and misunderstood by anyone who wants a story. Emily glanced at her shoes. Dry carpet near the lounge. Damp marks near Claire's heel. Not much. Enough. May I ask one question? Emily said. Claire turned her head with visible impatience. You have asked plenty. Emily's voice stayed level. Why are your shoes wet? The deck went still again. Claire looked down too quickly. Her cream heels were glossy at the toes, darkened near the seams. This is a yacht, she said. Everything is wet. Emily nodded toward the floor. Not up here. The deck crew wiped this area twice. The only wet place I saw was the lower corridor outside the equipment room. Claire laughed once, but it had no warmth left. So now damp shoes are evidence? No, Emily said. But damp shoes, a deleted camera file, a child sent below deck with a note, and a camera turned toward the wall begin to sound less like an accident. Paul looked at the tablet again. There is more. His thumb moved across the screen. A message thread with an outside number. No name saved. Nathan's expression became very still. Read it. Paul hesitated because the guests were listening. Nathan did not look away. Read only what matters. Paul swallowed. It says, delay the signing until morning. Create a safety concern. Make Whitmore look careless. Payment after press coverage. Nobody spoke. The words seemed to change the temperature of the air. The investors who had come to discuss numbers now stood face to face with something numbers could not soften. Claire's polished mask finally cracked. Not with rage, not with tears, with a small, exhausted sag of the shoulders, as if the performance had been heavier than anyone knew. You have no idea what it is like working for men like him, she said quietly. Nathan absorbed the words without defending himself. Emily watched him do it. That mattered. Every event, every signature, every room arranged perfectly, Claire continued. And if anything went wrong, I was replaceable. Invisible. Blamed before thanked. Nathan's eyes moved to Emily for one brief second, and the shame in that glance was honest. Claire had chosen the wrong answer to a real wound. That did not make the wound false. Emily understood that better than anyone on the deck. Oliver did not make you invisible, Emily said softly. Claire looked at her. For once, she did not have a reply. Emily stepped closer, not enough to threaten, only enough to be heard by the person who needed to hear her. If you wanted Nathan to face what he ignores, you could have told the truth. You chose to frighten a child. Claire's mouth trembled once, then closed. The captain quietly signaled 2 crew members to stand near the side passage, keeping everything calm, keeping everyone safe. No one touched Claire. No one needed to. The truth had already surrounded her. Nathan walked to Oliver and knelt in front of him, blocking the tablet from the boy's view. You did nothing wrong, he said. Do you hear me? Oliver nodded, clutching the blanket. Emily said that too. Nathan smiled a little, but it was not the bright public smile from earlier. It was smaller, sadder, better. Then we should both listen to Emily. Paul handed the tablet to the captain for safekeeping, and Nathan rose slowly. The old Nathan would have made a speech about legal consequences, reputation, and control. The man standing there now looked out at the guests, then at the crew, then at Emily, and seemed to understand the shape of the evening for the first time. It was not about a contract. It was not about a yacht. It was about all the quiet people he had trained himself not to hear until one of them saved what he loved most. He removed his ivory blazer, wet sleeve and all, and stepped toward Emily. She began to say she was fine, but stopped when she saw his face. He draped the blazer gently over her shoulders, not like a reward, not like charity, but like an apology made visible. I laughed at you, he said, low enough that it did not become theater, clear enough that everyone near them heard. And you still saved my family. Emily looked at him for a long moment. The wine-red ribbon at the back of her hair had come loose, one end resting against the ivory fabric now covering her shoulders. I did not do it for you, she said. Nathan nodded. I know. That was why the words stayed with him. The rest of the night did not return to what it had been. Music tried to begin again, but no one listened the same way. Glasses were refilled, but the laughter had lost its sharpness. The guests remained on the upper deck while the captain contacted the Coast Guard and arranged for the yacht to return to Newport Harbor. Claire Hensley sat quietly near the forward lounge with 2 crew members nearby, her tablet sealed in a clear evidence bag on the table beside the captain. No one shouted. No one made a scene. The sea moved around the Ivory Star as if it had seen richer boats, louder parties, and smaller truths than this. Oliver rested on a cushioned bench with a blanket around his shoulders, sipping warm apple cider the medic had found in the galley. His foot was sore, but not seriously injured, and every few minutes he looked toward Emily as if making sure she was still there. She was. Not because anyone ordered her to stay. Because leaving before the child felt safe would have gone against something older than any job description. Nathan stood near the rail with his hands clasped in front of him, his shirt sleeves damp, his ivory blazer still resting over Emily's shoulders. Without it, he looked less powerful somehow. Or maybe more human. The absence of the blazer had taken away the polished outline he usually hid inside. He watched his guests avoid his eyes. He watched his crew move with nervous discipline. He watched Emily crouch beside Oliver and tie her wine-red ribbon around the handle of his little blue sneaker so he could find it easily after the medic removed it again to check his foot. The gesture was small, tender, practical, exactly like her. Nathan walked over slowly. Emily stood before he reached them, already preparing to return the blazer. "You should take this back," she said. "It is cold." Nathan looked at the coat, then at the ribbon now looped through Oliver's sneaker. "I have been cold in better weather," he said. She studied him, unsure whether that was honesty or a rich man trying to sound wounded. His face answered before his words did. He was not performing anymore. "Miss Carter," he said. "Emily." Oliver corrected sleepily from the bench. Nathan glanced at his nephew, then nodded. "Emily, I owe you more than a thank you." She shook her head. "You owe him better locks, better people, and fewer rooms where nobody listens." A few crew members nearby heard it and went very still. Nathan did not flinch. "Yes," he said. "I do." She expected him to defend himself, to mention procedures, to say that no system was perfect. Instead, he looked toward the lower deck door where she had first stopped with the tray in her hand. "When you said you heard crying, I heard an inconvenience." His voice was quiet. "That is what frightens me now." Emily's expression softened, but only slightly. People in uniforms get used to being treated like interruptions. Nathan lowered his eyes. There were apologies that tried to erase the past, and apologies that finally agreed to stand inside it. His was the second kind. "I cannot undo that," he said. "No," Emily replied. "You cannot." The yacht began to move toward harbor, slow and steady, its lights stretching across the black water. Far ahead, Newport shimmered in small gold points along the shore. Behind them, the party had become something closer to a vigil. Investors spoke softly to crew members they had ignored an hour earlier. One woman helped gather blankets. Another asked the galley staff if they needed anything. Shame, when it was honest, sometimes taught people where to place their hands. Paul Merrick approached Nathan with a recovered access log printed from the bridge system. "Sir," he said. The lower deck door was opened with Claire's event badge at 9:41. Oliver entered 3 minutes later. The camera blackout began at 9:45. Nathan took the paper but did not read past the first line. He already knew enough. "Give it to the authorities when we dock," he said. And Paul, "Yes, sir." Nathan looked toward Emily. "From now on, every staff concern on any Whitmore vessel is recorded and reviewed before it is dismissed." Paul nodded. This time, he did not glance at Emily as if she were outside the chain of command. He looked at her as if the new rule had been written because of her, and maybe for people like her. When the yacht reached the harbor, red and white emergency lights reflected softly across the water, but the scene remained calm. Oliver was carried down the gangway wrapped in the blanket, Nathan walking beside him, one hand resting lightly on the boy's shoulder. Before stepping onto the dock, Oliver turned back. "Emily." She moved closer. "Yes, sweetheart." He held up the sneaker with her ribbon tied to it. "Can I keep this?" Emily smiled, tired and real. "Only if you promise to use it to remember that your voice matters." Oliver nodded solemnly. Nathan watched the exchange, and something quiet settled in him. Not admiration alone, not gratitude alone, a different understanding, the kind that arrives late and stays. After Oliver was safely with the medic team on shore, Nathan turned back to Emily. The wind moved between them, carrying the smell of salt and diesel and morning not yet born. "I would like to offer you a position," he began. Emily lifted one eyebrow. Nathan almost smiled, then corrected himself. "Not because I think money can fix tonight, and not because I think you need saving." She waited. "Because my company needs someone who hears what powerful people miss." Emily looked out at the harbor lights. For a while, she said nothing. Silence had always been mistaken for emptiness around her. Tonight, Nathan understood it was where she kept her strength. Finally, she handed him back the ivory blazer. "Then start by listening tomorrow," she said. "Not hiring tonight." Nathan accepted the blazer with both hands, as if receiving something more important than fabric. "Tomorrow," he said. Emily stepped onto the dock, her hair loose now, the wine-red ribbon gone with Oliver's sneaker, her uniform damp, her shoes ruined, her posture unchanged. Behind her, The ivory star gleamed under harbor lights, still expensive, still beautiful, but no longer untouchable. Nathan watched her walk away and did not call after her. For once, he let quiet have the final word. And long after the guests had gone, after statements were taken, after the sea settled against the dock in soft black waves, he would remember the moment she first stopped and listened. Not to music, not to money, not to him, to a small cry beneath the floor. The quiet ones are never truly ordinary. Sometimes, they are simply the only ones brave enough to hear what everyone else has learned to ignore.